Live. So, welcome everybody to another Captive Thoughts episode. I believe this is episode 11. The title of this is Pro Something or Another. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. How was your weekend, Chris?
Pretty good. It was a free comic book day this weekend. I saw Doctor Strange too.
Did you like it? I've heard kind of mixed reviews.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. But then again, I really like Doctor Strange. I like this actor's portrayal of him.
Right.
Um, I think a lot of people were thinking it was because of the multiverse stuff, and then after the Spider-Man movie, I think a lot of people were expecting just a ton of non-MCU Marvel cameos and stuff like that, and we didn't really get a lot of that.
Yeah.
We got Professor X was about it in one of the universes we visited, but it wasn't a ton of fan service like I think a lot of people expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to see it yet, but I really like the Scarlet Witch. I'm one of these few people who actually knew who that was before the movies, like who she was. So it'll be interesting, kind of, with seeing her going through this. Seems like they're wanting her to be more of a villain. I haven't seen the movie, so I don't.
Yeah,
It's kind of from the trailers. I'm kind of like feeling like she's kind of more of a villain a little bit.
well, I guess it's kind of a spoiler here because it kind of had me surprised. I thought the main villain would be the Shuma Gorath character, which is like Marvel's Cthulhu.
Hmm.
Well, he's dead 10 minutes into it, and I'm like, well,
Uh,
what's going on? And the trailers really make it seem like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch are going to have a nice team up, and well, that's not what happens.
that'll be good. I mean, because that might be interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna have time for the next few weeks before I really get a chance to check it out. So it'll be a while before I get a chance to watch it. But I had a good day yesterday. It was interesting Mother's Day yesterday. So and of course the week right before that, there was the leak about the upcoming SCOTUS decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. So that's caused a whole lot of stir around people. So it's people have been talking a whole lot about that. We're gonna go talk a little bit about it. I guess, Chris, what are your thoughts on Roe v. Wade itself, and then the court overturning it, and then the leak?
Well, I mean, Roe v. Wade is a very flimsy decision, and I mean, a lot of pro-choice people have even admitted that over the years. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, before she was on the court, said she was unhappy with it because I mean, if you want something done, you want it done right. You don't want it done in a way that's going to fall apart. So, I mean, it was a very flimsy decision. I think most constitutional scholars view this as something that should be a states issue, which is what it was before that, and what it will revert back to after this. Um, I don't really know why there was a leak. I mean, there's a lot of theories into who leaked it and why. I think right now the Democrats are trying to use this as an issue to fire up their base because they need something. It's funny, they're talking about, oh, you got to vote Democrat in 2022 or for pro-choice issues, and I'm just thinking you guys control the executive branch and the legislative branch. If you're so concerned about it, why don't you try to pass a law?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
I mean, you might not get it through the Senate because there are some moderate Democrats and all, but it's like you're not even trying. If you have those two branches, that seems to be what you should be trying to do if you're so concerned about it.
Yep. Yeah, it
I mean, I
does.
guarantee you, if a bunch of, especially further right Republicans had both branches and the and the legislative and the executive branch, they'd be trying to pass some law in their direction.
Yeah, it could be.
At least pretend to, for
Well,
the
right.
sake.
Yeah, they might at least try to bring it up just so it can fail, but they can say, "Well, we tried."
Yeah, they're not even doing that. It's so weird to me. It's like, well, you have to why? Why did you? If if you were a pro-choice progressive, you'd have to be looking at them like, well, why aren't you doing something?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of the same way. Matt Christensen did a really good video kind of going through Alito's statement, which was the one that was leaked, and really kind of breaking it down and kind of showing what you were saying, how Roe v. Wade was very flimsy. The reasoning was very, was a bit of a stretch trying to link privacy into this whole thing. And he mentioned Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He even mentioned a senator by the name of Joe Biden, who talked about how Roe v. Wade really needed to be overturned. But I don't think he amounted to anything. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of my point. Is it just sort of, yeah. In some ways, it's kind of bad for the pro-life. Like in some ways, it's good, and in other ways, it's bad actually for the more pro-life decision, right? Because it does send it back to the states, and so obviously in blue states, it's going to be pushed there. In some of the more red states, it's they've got a bunch of those trigger laws, and then you've got other states to where basically there's not going to be any change. It could go one way or the other at some point, but it does give a greater urgency for, I guess, people who are pro-choice to push for that kind of legislation. And in some ways, that does kind of hurt the right, because that does give a central targeted issue for Democrats to rally behind, which when there is a very specific target like that, they tend to do better, right? Like when they can target Trump, or when they could target gay marriage, like at these very, like, it seems to me the right tends to do better with ideas and attacking ideas and organizing against ideas, whereas the left does a lot better in organizing behind very specific either targets, like in the case of Trump, or issues like gay marriage and abortion. This would be a very specific issue that they could rally behind.
I mean, I think it'll give them a little bit of boost in this midterm here, but I think both sides on culture war issues tend to overemphasize or tend to overestimate how much most people care about that. Like, a lot of people care about these kind of things, but at the end of the day, it's like, gas is $5 a gallon, and there's food shortages, and like that's the kind of stuff people are going to get more worried about, because that's just the direct. I'm sorry, I got a dog whining behind me. But that's just the direct stuff that affects people,
No, I agree.
One second.
Yep. That's why he's doing that. I'll just keep going and saying, yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that people are going to ignore this. Like, I saw one person tweet out, just like that, the election became about abortion rather than it became about food shortages, gas prices, inflation, all of these other things. And no, those things are still there. It's not going to affect it as much, but I think long term it could definitely be more impactful. It depends on how things, if thinking long term, if that's even a possibility at this point. In terms of my own particular opinions, I typically lean a lot more pro-life. I'm one of these people who, as far as the states are concerned, I like the heartbeat law. I think that's a good standard. That was another problem with Roe v. Wade, is they talked about viability being a standard, which, if you've ever looked into the viability, that's not a really good standard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got a little dog here that decided he wants to make a lot of noise. Sorry. You've just decided you want to be really loud right now, huh? Viability is kind of a standard that'll change based on technology. I mean,
yeah, which is why it's not a good standard. If
it's possible in 50 or 100 years from now that viability will be basically at the moment of conception.
Yeah,
we can throw it in whatever device that is basically an artificial womb. So that's not really viability. There's preemies born right now that'll be just fine after a little bit of care, whereas a couple decades ago they were in for a miserable rest of their life if they survived.
Yeah, I mean, like my grandfather, he was a pediatrician, so he's delivered some babies. He actually delivered a baby that could fit in the palm of your hand. Now the guy was blind. That was one of the causes, because of the premature. But again, he still lived. He had a picture of him, had sunglasses in his office downstairs.
Hundreds of years ago, there were a lot of births where the midwives just drowned him, because it's like, wow, this kid's not going to make it. Let's put him out of his misery. Yeah. Technology is going to, it's just always going to make it, easier to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which
You
is
know?
a good thing. I mean
Yeah,
that'll
there's
work out, and it could be something again. You could have an artificial womb, and that could deal with a lot of this as well. Get it in there, and it can sustain an artificial womb, and then it can be born.
I've always kind of drawn a line at like brain activity for me,
It's just 42 days.
because I don't know, that's just, and I know a lot of my fellow Christians will be like, no, it's right at conception. I'm like, and I don't know if you have a soul right at conception, but I also don't have a PKE meter from Ghostbusters, so I can't test for a soul, but you can kind of test for a mind, and that's close enough. So I'm like, all right, brain activity seems like a good line to me. Like, I don't have a problem with, say, the morning after pill. I don't have any problem with that. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But
Yeah,
like, if you can, but at the same time, those late term things where the kid's fighting with the scissors, I'm like, okay, clearly this was not something you should have been doing.
right. Yeah, I mean, again, I like more of the heartbeat, I guess, because to me that just is a little bit, it's an easier standard. So it's a lot, with brain activity. Again, you could kind of get into questions of, well, how much brain activity should we count before, we're going to conclude this as a
I
mind?
mean,
Is it just a little bit like again, because you can start detecting brain activity from as early as 42 days into the
the
pregnancy.
heartbeat thing is right around the same line, so I don't
Yeah.
necessarily mind it. It's just on a pure philosophical level, I kind of cringe at that a little bit because I'm like, your heart is a muscle that pumps blood. I mean,
Well,
your brain is where
yeah,
your
but I'm
person.
not. I'm not talking about the philosophy here. I mean,
Like,
and
yeah,
and
so
I was
I,
going to
I
say
don't
with
mind it practically. I'm
yeah,
just saying,
just speaking practically, and that's what I mean. And the point with this is for drawing policy, right? For having a policy made up. That's why I like the heartbeat. Now, on a personal level, if you want to say, conception or that's I think there's leeway there. But in terms of making policy, that's why I like the heartbeat is because I use that for if you wanted to have a specific law, and so you want to have as clear of standard as possible. And that's why I like the heartbeat is because it's a very clear standard. You either have a
I
heartbeat or you don't.
I just noticed like a lot of this feels like one of those subjects where a lot of people there's very high emotion and not a lot of people putting a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
And indeed, a lot, and on both sides, I'm not trying to pick on one side there. A lot of people almost kind of get mad when you just like want to sit down and workshop things out and want to think about it. And they just kind of, I've noticed as somebody that doesn't really, isn't strongly in one camp or another, a lot of people get mad at me when I'm asking questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Just honest questions like, okay, well, what about this? And it's, it doesn't go well. And so, yeah, I've noticed a lot of just really dumb arguments, just really emotional arguments on both sides. I just see a lot of people shouting bumper stickers at each other.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like the whole rape thing, like speaking from lost, from like a policy standpoint, I think we should just, if you're on the pro-life, you should just concede on rape and incest. I mean, they only make up 1.5 together. They only make up 1.5% of all abortions. So as far as the law's concerned, sure. Now, if you wanted to say morally, look, okay, fine, it's legal. If you're raped, it's you shouldn't get an abortion. It's morally wrong. But I think that I can't see a good reason to say that the law has to do it in that case there, right? Because then in that instance you are forcing maternity on a woman. Like in every other situation, when they say, well, you're forcing maternity, it's like, no, you're the one that chose to have sex, so you're agreeing to the natural consequence to sex, which is the pregnancy. We're just saying you don't get to terminate that pregnancy. You don't get to end its life. You chose to have the sex, so you're choosing to deal with the consequences of that. But if a woman's raped, that argument doesn't work anymore. So then you are first forcing maternity on them. And so that's why I'd say, okay, well, since it only makes up this very small percentage of abortions in the first place, and it's difficult to make that argument, well, yeah, you might as well go with, okay, from a legal standpoint, sure, allow it.
Well, when a lot of these pro-choice people are like, "Oh, we need these late-term abortions," like I said, very early stages, I don't think I have much of a problem with it. But when you're like 6 months pregnant or something, I'm like, yeah, I don't think this is okay anymore. But at the same time, I'm like, if you didn't want this kid, like, why are you waiting so long? I mean,
Well,
you think that'd be, if you want to get an abortion, you think, I get it, schedules can get complicated, but maybe you set aside an afternoon for that.
Well, see, I'm wondering and I guess part of me, I'm going to play a little bit of armchair psychologist here, so I get it, right? But I'm wondering if there's a certain sense of a psychological safety net. Like, it's like, well, I don't really want to get an abortion at this time, but I want to know that I have the option. I want to know that I have the option to terminate this pregnancy at any point in time. And I'm wondering if that's really what some of this is about. Because I know that there are women out there who don't want to have an abortion, really don't make any plans to get an abortion, use safe sex and protection all the time, but they still want to be pro-choice, even though effectively they could get along without it because they like having it there as a safety net. Okay, if I did get pregnant for some reason, I know I could have an abortion. And it's more of a, again, a psychological safety net as opposed to any kind of practicality.
I don't know. I mean, for like the late term stuff, unless it's like some sort of health of the mother issue, which I mean does happen. I know a lot of pro-choicers want to act like that doesn't happen, but it's certainly not as common as our pro-lifers want to act like it doesn't happen, but it's certainly not as common as pro-choicers make it out to be. But those sorts of situations, like okay, fine, or if there's something like I don't know, some sort of really severe medical issue with the fetus, like you take an ultrasound and it looks like a transporter accident from Star Trek or something. Like, all right, fine. Those sort of severe, extreme circumstances, which aren't very common anyways.
No, they're not. And I mean, again, there can be instances where it's like, you could go through the whole process, but the baby's going to be born stillborn. Like, again, unfortunately, there are times to when parts of the baby don't develop correctly. So, like, I know there's one case here to where the baby's brain just, didn't develop. Everything else about the baby was developing, and the mother still could have gone through the process, but it was going to be born stillborn. And so in that case, yeah, okay, it's guaranteed it's going to die. Yeah, you might as well, end it at this point in the process and terminate the pregnancy.
I mean, for a legal standard, I don't really know where you draw the line, but there's certain things that just on a philosophical level, I'm like, yeah, that's a mercy killing.
Yeah, now you do have to be careful with that because
I'm not
obviously, yeah, I mean,
again, I'm not even saying I know what the legal standard is. Just on a philosophical level, there's certain things where I'm like, I don't really think that was wrong.
No, I mean, like I said, in that case there with that one instance that I talked about, I think it was completely justified. Yeah, when it comes to the health of the mother, that's another thing where it can get tricky legally because, how do you define that, right? Again, that's what some people are saying. Well, the mother's under a lot of stress. It's, they're under physical stress and emotional stress. So there you go. Her health's at risk. And it's like not exactly the same thing as, it's either have the baby or die or, whatever, die or have the baby.
Yeah, a woman's health is always at risk to some extent with a pregnancy. I mean, the mother dying in childbirth was a pretty common thing until reasonably recently. Shockingly common. And, technology, again, mitigates that, but it's always a possibility. So, yeah, where exactly you draw the line on that, I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard thing to legislate, but it just kind of bugs me that, like, there's a bunch of people that can't talk on the it's not even something a lot of people can seem to work out.
Yeah,
it's just the emotion is running so high that I don't know.
Well,
it's
like
just
said,
one of those
it's
issues.
Bumper sticker arguments.
Yeah, I've seen some in the last week or so. I've seen some of the dumbest arguments I've ever seen. My personal favorite for dumb pro-life argument is that if we didn't have abortion, Social Security wouldn't be in trouble.
Yeah, no, that's dumb.
Because the argument is, because Social Security is a pyramid scheme, if you don't know how that works, and the argument is, well, if we had a higher birth rate, this pyramid scheme would be viable for longer. And I'm like, first of all, that's terrible on a philosophical level to say, well, we need people to be born to prop up this broken system. I mean, that's like some Matrix pod stuff there. View of life, but also are you arguing that all of these unwanted children were going to be a net positive on the tax base? Because I think that's a little naive.
Yeah,
and then you got the pro-choice arguments where they're like, oh well, this is going to be The Handmaid's Tale. It's just always it's just always whatever show they watched with them. But It's gonna be the Handmaid's Tale. You're gonna be all women are gonna be put in the breeding pen. Like,
Well, or I like the one where it's like, well, okay, if this is going to be the case, then we've got to have free childcare, free healthcare, free schooling, free all. It's like, so basically, what you're saying here is that anybody but you is going to pay for this child. You get to have the sex, but it's everybody else's responsibility to pay for this child, or this child has to die. So anybody but you is going to be responsible for the kid.
yeah.
Okay,
And
got it.
then there's the argument that it's like, oh, well, now they're going to ban all contraception. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people on the social conservative side that
Want to do
want to
that?
push in that direction, um, but they're not. They're not the norms. All right,
No.
they're not the majority, and I think I think it is pretty easy to push back against them. I mean,
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I mean, I don't really. That's one of those things to where I've never really got. Like, again, when you talk about the ones that like it could maybe kill the baby, like I could kind of understand that one. I don't necessarily agree with it because in a lot of those cases, you've got a better chance of killing the baby when you take it home from the hospital than in the case of when it's going to be killed. Taking one of those pills. So I mean, that's different here. But like, people are like, oh, condoms are bad. I'm like, why? What's the I don't get it. I don't like I've never understood that.
there's a section of the pro-life movement, and it's at a leadership level. I don't think there's much of this at the groundswell, the normal people level. There's a section of the pro-life movement. It's mostly Catholic, but a few Protestants where I really get the impression abortion isn't really the point with them. They're just very, very concerned that people like they're just very, very concerned about the fact that everyone doesn't have 5 kids.
That's
And,
just
and I mean,
that's bizarre to me.
it, it's mostly a Catholic thing. And again, I'm not even saying it's a common thing with pro-lifers. It's just every once in a while you hear one of these leaders in the movement
Oh
talking.
yeah,
You kind of get this impression with them, like abortion isn't even really the point with them.
right. Yeah, and
It's just it's I don't know. There's 7.9 billion people last I checked, so we're not on the verge of extinction. But these people you'd swear there was like 9 of us left. The way they talk about birth rates.
yeah, that's bizarre. Because I mean, I've always heard this, right? Oh, you just want to control women, and like from the pro-choice side, this isn't about the babies. This is just about controlling women. It's like, again, from my standpoint, it's like, no, it's not. Now again, this is going to have a natural consequence. I mean, if you're wise and you're a woman, then knowing that, you can't have a baby's life to subsidize your sexual habits, you will probably alter your sexual habits. But that's just reality. And that's all I'm saying is that you don't get to subsidize your sexual habits with the life of a baby. You want to subsidize in other ways, like buying a bunch of birth control and all that kind of stuff. Whatever. I wouldn't do it, but okay, you do you. But this doesn't get to come at the cost of the baby's life. That's always been my point.
I mean, they sell condoms at the store, and
Yeah.
they're not expensive. And while they don't protect against everything, they're very effective against certain venereal diseases and very effective against pregnancy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I
They
mean, the
sell it.
pill is generally effective. I mean, if you take it regularly, a lot of times you've got, either they're not taking it regularly, intentionally because they want to get pregnant, or again, they're mixing it in some cases. But generally speaking, a lot of the pills can be very effective.
There's that little thing. I don't know what it's called.
IUD or something?
Yeah, it looks like a little
Why?
rubbery tee, but it's supposed to just block the entrance to the cervix, so you can't get pregnant. And from what I understand, they're pretty effective
Yeah.
and last a very long time before they have to be swapped out.
Yep. Now, I mean, again, people are like, well, why isn't there a pill for the men? And it's like, because with women, you're dealing with one egg versus with men, you're dealing with millions of sperm. So it's a little bit harder
Yeah, I don't.
there.
Was there a pill? Well, if there was a better, I bet a lot of guys would be happy to take it.
They would, but it's a lot more tricky. That's what I'm saying. Is it's a lot easier in the case of women again because it's one egg. You're trying to block entrance into one egg versus dealing with millions of sperm. So that makes it a little bit more tricky. It's again, hearing a lot of this too. It's amazing, just people going back and forth. And you're right. There's a lot of just nonsense.
I saw Elizabeth Warren screeching about it, and
Oh,
I like
jeez.
just, and I'm sitting here like Beth. Can I call you Beth? You your last period was in 1997, so this is not really pertaining to you.
No, but I mean, again, the only thing that she says, she's like, well, we're going to take this to Congress. It's like, good. That's what you should have done in the first place. And if you can't get it in Congress, then maybe you need to recognize that the nation isn't as much on your side in this as you think they are.
Yeah, you control both houses, so like, why are you sitting there like, oh, screeching and yelling and also And by the way, this decision hasn't even dropped.
No, it's
So
all leak. I mean, it's been
they're
confirmed, but
they're out there trying to like they're throwing bricks in the windows of these judges and stuff like that. There's all sorts of violence going on right now from the left. They're throwing Molotov cocktails into Catholic churches, and it's like, look, I'm no fan of the Catholics either, but let's calm down.
look, if you're going to vandalize a church, do it for the right reason, okay? I mean, joking, but
But no, it's just they're going nuts about it. They're because they're allowed to. The left is allowed to to burn down a CVS.
is it summertime already?
It's riot season again.
you know. And I mean, again, they were just waiting for an excuse. I mean, a lot of these people, if they're not paid, they're just looking for a reason to be destructive.
And again, I think they're just trying to shore up the midterms a little bit because they know they're in trouble.
Oh yeah, because
it's
what do
gonna
they have?
it's going to take a lot of pizza boxes taped on a lot of windows to hold on to Congress.
Yeah. People are pretty upset, and I mean, it's not good out there. I mean, I don't know. Do you still watch Sticks?
Yeah, I watched Sticks, and I know he's very pro-choice. He thinks that this will be an issue that'll hurt the Republicans. I don't really think it will. I mean, again, it could energize the Democrats some, but
I was more thinking about what he was saying with the economy. How he was saying that, based off of what he's looking at, he's not an economist or anything, but he's like, this is starting to show signs of collapse.
yeah, things are rough.
Yeah.
And you can't play these games for too long. And I mean, it's weird. It's like, what do you call that? Rolling blackouts when, as soon as the power comes on somewhere else, it goes off. We have these rolling shortages where as soon as like, you go to the grocery store, they'll just be out of the most random things for like a week. And then it's a completely different thing.
Yep.
Like, I went there a couple months ago. There's a big sign saying, we have no wet cat food. Dry cat food they had plenty of. But for some reason, the wet cat food we had a big run on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to be good. And of course, that's it's really supposed to hit in the summertime, is what they're saying. Like once we get into June and July, that's apparently when it's really supposed to start getting bad too when it comes to the food shortages.
Yeah, people need to eat and they need to put gas in their car, and with the exception of a few very, very politically minded people, that's going to be on their minds a lot more than abortion, one way or another. That's.
Well, and I mean, from people talking about the leak, right? And it's like some people think, well, it was definitely someone who's very progressive who leaked it, and then of course like the mainstream media is saying, well, someone who's very conservative. I could almost buy it would be a conservative who would drop it now, so that way by the time the food shortage is really hitting the summer, it's out of the public memory. Like I could almost buy that. From a tactic standpoint, it's actually not a bad tactic. Go ahead and drop it now. Let everyone have their freak out right now, early on. And then there's going to be a number of things that are going to be bad that are going to hit between now and the midterms that will, basically bring the conversation back against the Democrats, as opposed to if this happened right in the middle of the summer, that could maybe shift things. Gives you a longer period for people to forget.
My theory is it's one of the progressives. It's probably some intern working for maybe that new judge or whatever. And it's not even a tactical thing, because I think you could make an argument this benefits or hurt either side on a political level. You can go around in circles with that. I just think these progressives are not professional people at all. They're just across the board. They're usually a bunch of ridiculous diversity hires. They are children mentally most of the time. That can't view anything except through the lens of Harry Potter or Star Wars, and look, I'm a big dork too. I like dorky stuff, but I'm not sitting here, every time there's a political issue going, this reminds me of an episode of
The
DuckTales. Like,
Democrats are like the Empire, and
yeah,
we're
it's
like the
just,
Jedi.
like this, I'm not like, oh, this person I'm running against is the Green Goblin. Like, no, it's let's all, and it's fine to make an analogy like that once in a while. I'm not even saying you can't ever make an analogy to fiction or something. That's fine, but like, that can't be all you do. Come on.
Are you a Spawn fan?
I do like Spawn a little.
Some of these people we could go by with calling them the Violator.
Eh, you know, some of them do look like that clown.
You know.
But no, again, a lot of these progressives, they're just children. They're just emotionally children. So because it's a big violation of decorum and quite possibly federal law to leak this stuff, and to be like, I don't like this, and I'm going to tell them. I can. That sounds a lot more like one of the lefties than the righties to me.
It could be, yeah. I mean, because you're right. I mean, from a tactic standpoint, you could see it. I think it could help the right in some ways more, but no, I mean, I could just see a progressive, like you said, just being completely unprofessional and just leaking it. Which, kind of speaking of that, right, and speaking of with the diversity hires, have you heard what Netflix is getting in trouble with recently?
Oh, what'd they do now?
So, they hire a bunch of black women, right, only to months later fire them. Yeah. And sometimes they'll promote them and then they'll fire them, like, within the next month.
How did the concept of a Netflix original go from something where everybody's going to talk about it, it's going to be a cultural phenomenon, to something that is an absolute joke in the course of a couple of years? You know what I mean? I could remember like 2015, 16, even 17, where it's like, oh, have you seen the latest Netflix original? It's amazing. Stranger Things, the Daredevil, Castlevania. These were all fantastic shows that just a lot of people were talking about the moment they dropped. It was all. I remember the excitement about these things, and they are dropped in a season, so it was almost like a novel. People asked like, "How far are you in it?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's like, a Netflix original is literally a joke. It's literally a meme about like taking a white guy and turning him into a black transsexual wheelchair or something. Like, it's literally a meme like that. And it's how did you mess up your reputation so fast?
Yeah, I don't know. Bad timing. Not being creative, not telling stories, just wanting to send a message.
People now think of Netflix original and they think of like Cuties or A Pregnant Man or whatever that was called. Like, yeah, that gone is the days when somebody thinks of Stranger Things or
that. Yeah, what was it? No, that was Amazon that did that Watchmen, that horrible Watchmen series.
No, that was HBO.
Or is that that's HBO?
Oh, I forgot about that. That
was trash. Of course, Disney's trying their best with all their different series. They're trying to be meme worthy in that. It seems like each one of their original series just ends up down the tubes too, for the most part.
Yeah, I liked WandaVision and I liked What If. Falcon and Winter Soldier was rough.
Boba Fett was rough.
Mandalorian was good, and I'm not even a Wars guy.
No. WandaVision was okay. It kind of had a rocky landing. Like, it got worse the longer it stayed on.
I got bored with Loki. I heard it picks up towards the end. Maybe I'll finally finish it, but I got like 3 episodes in. I started Moon Knight, and it's pretty good so far, but I've heard the ending kind of fumbles.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I hadn't really been interested in. I don't know much about Moon Knight and the actor. Aside from a few things that he's been in, I'm not a big fan of his. He's got to be in certain roles. Seems like Ex Machina. He's really good in that.
I honestly I'm not watching that much TV right now. I've kind of tried to cut back on that sort of stuff. Like, I don't watch a ton of YouTube anymore. I've tried not to. Like, I pay attention to the America First collapse because that's just fascinating to me. So, like, I watch Kino Casino, but that's about it.
Yeah, I just keep up with some of this stuff. a lot of this will just be various articles. Like, Disney has wiped out 2 years worth of gains in the stock market. That's gone now. So they're right back to where they were before the boom that they got in 2020.
That's, I mean, it's their fault. A lot of this,
Yeah.
across the entertainment industry, it's like it's your fault. You're the one messing this up. It's not that people have across the board decided they don't want to watch movies or TV anymore. They just don't want to watch what you're making.
Yeah, and I mean, people, whatever. You got the cliched saying, but if you're only going to appeal to a certain group of people, even the people that you're appealing to, they're not caring to really buy into what you're selling. They just want to see, are you telling what the message is? Great. Now I don't care about you. The moment that, whatever, pick a show. The moment that they can get it to say whatever they want it to say, they don't care about it anymore. It's out of their mind. They're not doing this so they can enjoy it. They're doing this so that way they can say, see, look, this is another thing. This is another thing that's saying the exact same thing. That's what it's about. It would be the same thing as if, when the religious right sort of wanted this, right? Where, it's like, well, everything had to sort of have a Christian perspective on it or whatever. And it's not that they actually cared about any of those properties. They just wanted they only cared as if they were promoting something Christian. And you don't need to appeal to those kind of people if you want to be successful.
No, and there are certain people that just want propaganda, and those aren't people that are going to be your audience anyways.
And especially if you have to break things in order to push that propaganda, if you're going to have to break your universe, break basic storytelling to push that propaganda, then yeah, you're just going to tick people off.
But yeah, lately I've been just trying to do more reading, do more writing, that kind of stuff, and so that's just a personal thing with me. I've kind of I sort of stepped back a little while ago and took note of the fact that like a lot of this stuff can, especially like the YouTube videos and scrolling videos, a lot of it can, having too much options like that can kind of kill your attention span if you're not careful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot of it's a big time sink. I mean, it's because that's something I've noticed too. Sometimes I've listened to something. I remember I got like halfway through the video. It was like I don't know, 10-minute video. I'm like, why am I even listening to this? I don't really care what this person's talking about. I don't really know what they're talking about. Why am I even listening to this? Like, do I just want something on? And so yeah, I've kind of tried to back off of some of that as well. It's just here or there. There's a couple of channels that I'll kind of, like I said, I'll still watch Sticks in the morning. I'll watch a couple of his videos, just to kind of keep up on some of these things. Aside from that, not as much of it. It's just now I did see the Anna Kasparian meltdown over the whole abortion thing, which you said you saw that.
Oh yeah, she was unhappy.
Man,
she was
that's an understatement.
Oh.
I thought the best part of this was when she was going on her tirade about the Democrats, like, they don't care about you. They're going to get their abortions. They're good. They're old, blah, blah, blah. They just don't care. And part of me is like, man, I wish you really meant that. I wish you really felt that way about them. But we all know that when election season comes around, you're going to be right there ready for the D. And by D, I mean Democrat. I mean,
ready for the D. Come on, Tom. This is a family show.
No, I mean, seriously, though. I mean, she wants to talk about, they don't care. I'm done. It's like, no, you're not. Come on. You can't quit. You're going to be right back because, no, you're not. Again, if you did mean it, that would actually, we could maybe have some common ground here. Because, yeah, I agree. People in the ruling class, be them Republican or Democrat, yeah, no, they don't care about us. They're completely out of touch. But people like you will keep voting for them because you feel like you have to. And that's the system that it's in. You're so connected to your ideas that you're not willing to set them aside long enough to get these people out. Yeah, you can't understand that. You can't understand the idea of, allying with someone for a specific task, and then when that task is complete, you don't necessarily have to be their ally anymore.
And like I said, the Democrats, they have both houses right now, and I don't hear anything about a bill they want to pass that says abortion is okay at a federal level. I mean, I don't hear them doing any of that.
Of course, again, that would be bad for them too. Like that.
I mean, It would. I'm just saying, from a strictly like, okay, you believe in this thing and you want to make it happen. Well, then do something. I mean,
Yeah, but they'd get even more creamed if they did that. I mean, it's in some ways it's a lose lose. Like I said, the only thing that they could really do is to try to say if the Republicans really pushed on it and people really felt like it was a threat, maybe then. But
I'm actually surprised they're not using this to because I think it was like last year they were talking about just packing the court. Just like we're just gonna put like 57 judges in there or something. We're gonna make it like the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 roster here. Just
well, now does
but
the court have a say in that at all?
I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that was never done because it's just something that we never did. I think it wasn't a rule so much as just being decent and civilized that held people back on that, which of course is not much of the case in politics anymore.
Yeah, because
Uh, but weirdly, I'm not hearing them talk about that now. I thought that was going to be like the first thing out of their mouth after this, and then maybe I should shut up. Maybe I'm reminding them, but
yeah, I don't know. Because I mean, on the one hand, you almost don't want to, right? Like if the Supreme Court had any say, like I would think even more liberal people would be against it because that's just diminishing their own power. The more
yeah, I
people you
don't.
put on the court, the more power the less power they have, the more
Yeah, I
diminished
don't
it
know if
is.
they do or not. I mean, I'm really not sure. I think it's just kind of we don't do that here is what was holding people back. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not,
And I mean, because that's one of the things with like the filibuster, right? Like they made they've made big talks about getting rid of the filibuster, but that's part of the reason why they can't get that passed is because you do have Democrats saying, well, no, we like the filibuster. If we lose power, we're going to want it, so we don't want to get rid of it. So they had enough sense to sort of recognize that. So and that's why that didn't actually happen. So
the
I was wondering if it was.
filibuster, as someone who's been paying attention to politics since the late '90s, is literally the perfect example of an issue where I've seen people's positions flip in just a couple of years based on who's in power.
Yep.
I remember the Bush years when all those social conservatives in particular, like, let's do what is this filibuster crap? Get rid of that. And as soon as Obama was in power and they lost the House, it's like the filibuster is sacred. And again, the exact flip on the left of the filibuster is sacred. Oh, let's get rid of it. It sucks.
And see, and that's how you know it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, let's leave it.
Yeah.
Clearly, if whoever's in power, um,
Wants to get rid of it, and then they don't want to get rid of it when they're not in power.
yeah, then it's clearly so. If anything, I'd enshrine it to permanence.
Yeah, it's working as a good restraint, which is its purpose.
If anything, let's pass a law reinforcing the filibuster.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. It'll be interesting seeing how all of this really affects things, and if it'll have any effect on the conversation of abortion at all. Generally speaking, at least it seems like to me, most people are kind of because like when I was growing up, it seemed like to me most people, maybe this was just the area where I grew up, most people were very pro-choice. But now, as time has gone on, even these people who are pro-choice are like, well, I'm pro-choice, but this thing's kind of really gotten ghoulish, and that kind of seems to be where a lot of people
Yeah,
are at
there's a
right now.
real ghoulishness on a lot of these. It's just like you just like killing babies, don't you?
Yeah,
Like I don't know. And and maybe this is my bias because I've never fully identified with either side, but I feel like there's a lot more people that feel that way that just kind of, you know, that I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't super strongly on one side or another. Um, Sometimes I wish those people would speak up a bit more.
yeah. I mean, from the pro-life, it would seem like focus on when is it alive? Pick a standard. If brain activity, heartbeat, and focus on because again, if it's a living being, right, then okay, it should have the rights, and that's essentially the main point there, and that's really the point that you need to focus on. All the rest of this stuff, you know, it just kind of is noise. That to me, that really comes down is the fundamental issue.
Well, that is the issue. I mean, like people want to. The issue is this a human being?
Yeah.
Like people want to make it an issue about this, that, or the other thing. It's not an issue of privacy.
Nope.
It's not an issue of the low birth rates. Whatever of the family stability. No, is this a human being? That is the fundamental issue here. And I personally just can't. I can't look at it, just a second ago fertilized egg and call that a human being. I just have a hard time with that.
Yeah, but at the same time, neither can we look at someone getting into their second trimester and say, "Oh yeah, no, that's not." That's just a clump of cells.
Yeah, the difference between the baby immediately before and after its birth is not really there. So I'm not like, well, it's not a person till it's born. I don't know about that.
Like I'm trying to figure out, because we had to for my baby, we had to get a 3D ultrasound. It was we didn't get it like you can get them like as a thing if you wanted to, but we actually had to get it for medical reasons. I'm trying to remember when that was, but I mean if you looked at her with that ultrasound versus beforehand, it's amazing just how different she is. I mean, like I could show you some pictures of the ultrasound. Like I got one in September. Oh, here you go. This is yeah, we could get a picture of this, and it was in when's the date here? September. And you can see what she. That's at least when I took the picture here. I'm trying to see if I can find the date actually on it. Yeah, so this would be September 3rd. You can see her then in there. If I can, I'll try to find it and see if I can put it up on the screen. But very similar to how she looks when she's born. And there's just really no way to say that that's not a kid. That's not a child. That's just a clump of cells. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I don't. I've never thought that. Again, those late terms. There's certain, health of the mother or extreme medical issues with the fetus or something, the baby. That's one thing, but you should be like, well, this isn't a kid, and it's like, well, it was fighting with the scissors. I think we could say that was a kid.
Yeah, it seems to want to be alive.
Yeah. But at the same time, and again, just for me, and I know a lot of Christians don't feel this way, but like, I think therefore I am. If you can't show me that it's sentient and sapient, I have a hard time caring about it. I mean, and I'm not even saying like if it were me, if I was a woman in that position, would I be comfortable? I don't know. There's a difference between would I be comfortable doing it and do I want the full force of the law to impose this on somebody?
Well, again, I think that's where it comes down to if it's a human being or not, right? Because it's like, would you want the full force of the law to enforce the fact that someone can't murder you?
Well, no, I'm saying like in those early stages, like I feel like we're probably not dealing with what I would call a person, but I would still, like if it were me, I'd still maybe have a lingering doubt about it, but not enough that I'm like, okay, the law needs to step in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point there needs to be a law for, I'd say with maybe, again, either heartbeat or brain activity on a federal level that does recognize it as a human being. And then for some of these other points, you could leave it up to the state. And then in that point, it's like, okay, so anything before this is up to the states. States, you decide, you guys work it out. But at this point here, we're going to recognize it as a human being, and there you go. And it's going to have all the same protections that any other human being will have. And because it has the same basic right to life.
I think at about like 50 days is about when I think you could legally call it a person. Just nearly 2 months.
Sure.
Like I think that's about where you can detect a heartbeat. I think if
oh, definitely,
you could probably detect the brain,
yep,
that kind of thing. And I mean that's from a pragmatic standpoint, that's long enough for a woman to realize that she is indeed pregnant and make a decision. You know what I mean? Like again, I just didn't get around to it for a couple of months. Like I don't know what to tell you. Set aside an afternoon if that's what you want. But that would be kind of my standard. I know a lot of people were like, no, write it the moment of conception, and I'm like, okay, fine, but I just don't think that's a good legal standard.
Yeah, so I just pull this up here. At day 43 through 49, it's approximately half an inch long. There are two eyes, and the area that will be the nose and the mouth are marked with connected lines. The cranial nerves and the brain are growing. It is possible that the heartbeat can be observed during an ultrasound. At days 50 through 56, the tail is almost gone. It's possible to recognize the nose, mouth, and lips. The face appears to be that of a mammal, but most closely resembles a pig-like creature. The brain's
So it looks
higher
like Ethan
functions
Ralph.
have not yet developed, while pain sensors have appeared. There's no way for them to send pain signals to the brain yet because of the pathways. Part of the nervous system have not yet formed. Sex glands are growing, but it's not possible to see gender at this time. Toes and fingers may still have some webbing.
So that's about where Ethan Ralph stopped developing, is what you're saying? He just kept growing in size, but he didn't really,
And
he
girth.
never really developed beyond that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's week 7 right there. So, I mean, that's still very, very, very early on in the pregnancy. Most people, most women tend to figure out that they're pregnant around, week 4 or 5. You can pretty much get a definite by about week 6. Like when we went to the doctor, at 5 weeks. We had to come back. We had to wait an extra week to really come back to be sure.
Again, I get yelled at by some of these pro-lifers for saying the standard, and I'm like, I'm holding a standard that's not really that far off from you. I'm a couple weeks off from where you're right at conception, but it's like, I'm not. Yeah. Somebody in the chat says Sui. Exactly. Sui's for Ralph. I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those issues where I don't even like talking about it. I like, it's nice to talk to you about it because, it's nice to talk to a pro-lifer that's not going to shout at me.
I got a sore throat, so
and the pro-choicers are certainly no better. I mean, it's,
No, I mean it's just crazy, and
you hate women.
Yeah, well, I've never really gotten the whole my body, my choice. It's like it's not your body. That's one of those arguments. I don't get that. It's like again, it's not even your DNA.
If you want to make a hardcore ANCAP argument, I'm talking, a nuke in every yard ANCAP kind of argument. That okay, it's a separate person, but it's inside you, and you're basically evicting it from your property, right? That would be one thing, but that's coming from the same people who want to live off my tax dollars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, again, from a legal standpoint, you can't even do that. I mean, I get from an ANCAP perspective, sure.
Yeah, I'm saying,
but I mean, for example, if you and I, let's say I say, hey, you want to come out on my boat, right? And we go out to Lake Michigan, and then we get in an argument, and I decide that I don't want you on my boat anymore. I can't kick you off my boat because there's no way you could swim back. Like if we're out in the middle of Lake Michigan, right? You can't just swim back to the shore. Me evicting you from my property would basically ensure your death. So even though you're technically, infringing on my property because you'd be at risk of losing your life, your right to life trumps my right to property in that moment because, again, me evicting you would ensure your death. I'd have to take you back to shore to another boat.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, just from a purely philosophical ANCAP argument. The problem with that is, I literally saw a pro-choice. It's a meme now, but I saw a pro-choicer holding a sign that said, "Parasites have no right." Which, okay, you know what? With some of you leftists, I don't think that's a road you want to go down. That's all I'm saying. If we're going to make that the standard, well, I'm almost game.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem with the whole, viability thing as well, with that having that as a standard. That's, because again, the baby, even once it's born, is not technically viable. It still needs the mother. It still needs a lot of things. It really can't live by itself. So, making foolish standards like that is ridiculous.
We're not sea turtles where you kick some sand over the eggs and be like, good luck.
Well, and I mean, likewise on the pro-life thing, right? If you're not going to consider, any kind of sentience, it's just, anything there. Well, is that a standard that you hold with other stuff? Now it's a little bit different there because I guess you could say, well, with life, this isn't going to be anything else. It's always going to be a human. It's so, it's not like it's just, it's not, when they say, it's a potential human, it's like, it's destined to be a human. It's not going to become anything else. It's not like, oh, it could be a human, but then it could also be a dog or it could be a leaf. It's like, nah, it's just human. It's always going to be a human. It cannot be anything else. It is what it is. It's the question of, is it a human yet, though?
Well, I mean, sometimes I hear pro-lifers go like, "Well, it has the genetic code of this new person." I'm like, okay, but my finger has my genetic code. If I chop it off, I don't have a twin. I've always considered like brain activity to be the line. It just seems like the natural line to me.
And I think from a policy standpoint, with the technology that we have now, that's acceptable. Again, personal people, I think on a personal level, you could have, differences, and you could push people socially and personally and that kind of stuff in different directions. And that's another thing, again, is, recognizing that not all of your personal beliefs have to be enshrined by the law. And I think that's part of the problem with so much polarization here is there's so many people who are trying to use government or big corporations to enforce their own personal beliefs rather than saying, okay, what can I actually live with here?
I mean, social conservatives are famous for, that. And now the left has gotten their own version of Puritanism with these woke types or whatever you want to call them this week, where it's the same thing. It's like, well, this is my personal morality that I intend to impose on everybody. And it just doesn't work.
No.
I mean, there is that saying you can't legislate morality. And some people want to be like, well, of course everything is morality because I'm saying you're not allowed to stab somebody and that's morality. But it's like, there's very clearly a difference between, your own personal morality and something that's infringing upon another person's rights.
Right. And it has to go down to what is the purpose of government? What are the purpose of these laws? And so from there you can determine, okay, well, which laws should we really be seeing, what beliefs and, what's the overlap between the belief and the law? And so, okay, which beliefs do we need to enshrine in law? Like, again, right, not infringing on the rights of others. That that's a morally wrong thing, right? That's a belief. So, but that should also be enshrined, right? So there is overlap there. Murdering somebody, right? That's a belief. The idea of murdering somebody or raping somebody. Well, yes, that should be protected by law. So what's the purpose of government? And then with that purpose in mind, where do your personal beliefs overlap with what should also be policy? And it's not going to be, it's going to be a Venn diagram. It's not going to completely overlap. It shouldn't anyway, because then that's tyranny.
Like, I mean, I argue very vehemently with a lot of pro-lifers on issues of euthanasia and all. Like, I think
you're not for euthanasia.
No, I'm very much.
So you're for euthanasia.
And like pro-lifers aren't, and I'm like,
well, now,
I shouldn't even say I'm for it.
Are you for elderly in Asia?
But no, I feel like that's somebody's choice. You know what I mean? Like, if you're dying from some horrible disease and you decide it's time to expedite that process, I mean, to me that's a decision between you and God. I really like. There's almost something arrogant about the state outlawing suicide because it's like, that's a quote unquote crime that if I committed, I'm officially out of your jurisdiction. Like, who's going to arrest me? The Ghostbusters? Like.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something where it's like, I really don't agree with them on that. Like, if end of life things, that's between you and your family and your doctor. And
I can agree with that.
I don't think you answer to anybody but God.
I could agree with that, but I would also have to put this caveat, though, that cannot be taxpayer funded.
I mean, I don't particularly want virtually any medical thing to be taxpayer funded, so I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Well, again, I'm one of these people where I'm like, hospitals, basically where they stabilize you. I don't mind that being taxpayer. I think that can help for the general welfare. So to me, it can be on a state by state basis. It doesn't need to come out of your federal taxes, but I think state taxes. That's
the biggest problem with having the government run medical things in general. And again, a hospital, Yeah, if you have emergency need, we're going to take care of you before we ask who's paying for it. That's understandable. Um, we're not going to run your card before we stop the bleeding.
Right.
Um, but in general, like if the government controls medical stuff, then
Oh, they
yeah,
control you.
yeah, they're ultimately going to. It's ultimately going to be a Logan's Run thing where they're going to decide who lives and who dies because that's just a basic law of the universe that the person paying the bills calls the shots.
Yeah, he who has the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule.
Yeah, I mean it kind of is.
Well, no, I mean,
So
again,
people
not
like
biblically speaking, it's not the golden rule, but it is the reality. If you have the resources, then you're making the decisions.
yeah, so like people are like, oh well, there'll be death panels. I'm like, of course there will be.
Well, and I mean, and not it won't just be limited to that, right? I mean, if the government's going to pay for, your diabetes treatment, do you really think they're going to allow you to keep eating things that are going to give you diabetes? Then they're going to
Yeah,
have to pay for? No, they're going to say no. You're not allowed to eat this stuff anymore. No, we're cutting
so
any kind of this sweet stuff. It's out of here.
but yeah, just on principle, people are like, oh well, the government has to stop someone who's dying from. I'm like, no, that's. And on a moral level, there's certain situations where I just don't think it's wrong at all. I mean, some of these people are very convinced that you need to cling to life at all costs. And I don't understand how religious people of all people came to that conclusion. But
Well, I mean, it's because of the sanctity of life, right? Because they believe that life has intrinsic value. I mean, this is where, for some of them, I would say, I guess, in being charitable here, right? It's life has value, and so that value is it doesn't need to be that life doesn't because it has value. It doesn't need to be terminated just because you have this disease. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying you agree or disagree or anything like that, but I mean, I think that that's a little bit more. It's not just saying you have to cling to life at all costs because otherwise you're going to die. It's that life has value in and of itself, so it shouldn't be disregarded. It shouldn't be terminated, even if there is some kind of disease, terminal disease or bad circumstance.
I get that. But like I said, I think there's just on a philosophical level, and I mean, I'm a Christian myself, obviously. It's why I'm co-hosting your show, but it's just not a conclusion I've come to. I think there's elements of dignity. Dignity has value. You know what I mean? Like, there's, there's suffering for a purpose is good, but suffering for its own sake isn't good. You're,
True. But do we always understand why we're suffering in the moment, right? A lot of times we can go through suffering and not understand it, and it's only afterwards do we understand what the purpose was. And of course, suffering, from a Christian standpoint, suffering is not, it serves a purpose, but it's not always for us. Sometimes the purpose is for other people.
I mean,
Sometimes
yeah, it might be. And look, I'm not saying, well, if you're dying, you definitely have to check out early. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's, eh, there's certain circumstances, like, I'll be honest with you, if I was ever diagnosed with like Alzheimer's and they're like, yeah, you're about like a year away from just completely losing your mind, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to go eat a gun now. I mean, I probably check off a bucket list first and get my affairs in order and say goodbye to everybody, but I'm not going to live like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, ALS is one of those other diseases to where it's pretty horrifying.
I mean, like the mind, like it's one thing for your body to deteriorate. That's horrible. But the mind, I don't want to, I don't want the very person I am to be chipped away at. It's just something I couldn't face.
Well, I mean, do you know what happens with ALS?
With specifically, no, I don't.
Or it's also known as Lou Gehrig's.
No, I'm not familiar with what happens.
You
with
essentially become a prisoner of your own body. So your mind is still, I mean, dementia can occur in it, but for a large part, your mind is still active, but your body basically loses the ability to talk to itself.
Yeah, that's probably a nightmare I wouldn't want either.
Yeah. It's a horrible disease.
And also, like, I just wouldn't want, who maybe I have kids at that point or, nieces or nephews who want to take care of me. And it's like, no, go live I don't want to be I know it sounds harsh. I'm not saying I got to get on the ice floe, but I don't want to be a burden at the same time.
All right, on the piece of ice there, Grandpa.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you know,
we judge that kind of thing in the ancient world, but life was a lot more about survival back then
yeah, no,
than
it
it is
was.
now. So, I mean,
Yeah, it is a very tricky one, especially in today's world, to where you can sustain somebody, but they're not really living. You know,
I heard it said in like a medical show, and I don't remember what show it was. I don't remember if it was House or Scrubs. I don't remember. It was some one of those types of shows. But some doctor said we can in one of those shows we can keep people alive long after they've lost what makes them a person.
yeah.
And that's just I know a lot of Christians wouldn't agree with me, but I'm like, yeah, there's certain things where I'm like, you know, the line from sometimes death is better.
Well, I mean, it can be, and I mean, I don't know. It's one issue that I definitely, I mean, I'll admit, I struggle with, because you know, I think about some of these things, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I can certainly, I'm very sympathetic to people who would want to do that. I don't, it's not something, you know, that I would be like, oh, you know, oh, just you know, what a weak person. You know, they're just ending their life. They're just weak. Like I would never be like that. I very sympathetic, and at the same time, like I think about my grandmother, right, who had dementia, and you know, she struggled with it for thankfully for not as long as she could have, but you know, for about 3 years, her memory was going, and I don't know though. I mean, there are a number of ways in which I saw how my father grew in taking care of her. There were a number of ways in which we grew together because I was talking to him, and you know, he kind of got to talk to me about it. It was kind of like, you know, the kind of one of those first times where I really got a peek behind the curtain. You know, he sort of stopped being as much of my dad as more of just, you know, my friend in that way. So our relationship really grew there as I was there for him and he was there for his, you know, his mother. And that wouldn't have been there if, you know, if she had been like, because, and I really think my grandmother in her right mind probably wouldn't choose necessarily. She may not choose to go through it. She might have and she might not have. But so there was a lot of things that, you know, came out of that was good. And from her perspective, you know, when she really kind of when she was kind of going, it didn't bother her as much because, you know, and that's the thing, is that it's a lot worse for the people watching it than the people going through it.
Oh yeah, that's which is kind of part of the. Yeah, it's a,
You know,
it's a
because again,
joke I
as
heard
one
once. That,
doctor said, they don't remember what they don't remember.
yeah, there's a joke I heard once where it's like Alzheimer's isn't all bad. You get to meet new people every day.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, and even, you know, like again, they sort of kind of lose a lot of those same, like a lot of things that we think, well, that would just be horrible. Like it's not to them. Now that again, you have to get there. There are earlier points where they can kind of recognize that to where it is bad, but eventually they reach a point where it doesn't bother them. So it's a lot harder on the people around them. So you know, it is. It's something that again, it's an issue that I struggle with, and I
There,
you know.
there's a teacher from my high school. I'll just name him. Why not? Kurt Morris. Nobody's going to play internet detective. But I found out about 10 years ago, and I graduated about 20 years ago. That's how old I am. Um, but he's one of the few teachers I remember at all, let alone fondly. And he was a very bright man. You know, he was a Christian, and he was one of those guys in my agnostic days that kind of challenged me. And one of the first times a Christian didn't sound like an idiot to me. And I found out about 10 years ago that and it was shortly after I graduated, and he was very young for it to happen. He had Alzheimer's. He started to lose his mind. You know, he literally was losing track of things. Like he kept losing his keys and stuff like that, just all the time. Like, and he went to the doctors, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you got like a couple of years for this is." And you know, to this day, every once in a while, I'll maybe donate to the family or something because I know they had like GoFundMe. But you know, like I got a T-shirt at one point from one of their GoFundmes. But to this day, if he crosses my mind, I often just find myself praying like, "Lord, take him home." It is ridiculous, and I mean, maybe I'm wrong in that, you know, but
No, I mean this. I mean you know, again, I'll say for me, it's a very difficult issue. It's one that I certainly wrestle with, and I can't say that I'm a definitive yes or no. again, on the same tide, I could see how, people could definitely abuse euthanasia. Like I see a number of the abuses there, and so that definitely makes me want to recoil from it. Especially when you can see how manipulative people can be and how they can sort of, they could manipulate people into doing this for various reasons. So that's definitely a concern. But again, at the same time, seeing people suffer, and you just sort of wonder, well, is there really any purpose in this suffering? Is there really, or is it better for them to just end it? And that's a difficult. I mean, again, it is. It's a difficult question. And of course, how much of this should we leave up to the Lord and say, well, Lord, this is in your timing. It's not in my timing. Versus recognizing that God also does work through people sometimes, though.
I don't know. Like I said, it doesn't feel like one of those things that the heavy hand of the state should be very deeply involved in. It feels very complicated. It feels very personal to a lot of people. A lot of people would have no problem facing things that some people just couldn't face.
Maybe it should be something in general to where I'm wondering if maybe it could be something to where you have to petition the state in some ways, and but the state could give allowances. So it's like generally it's no, but the state could give allowances. You could petition it. And it would be like from a state by state basis. Like, so, if like you're in, Arizona, right? Well, then, okay, someone's got, some kind of, you're like, look, this person's miserable, they're suffering. We want to petition to allow this, and then they can decide from there.
And I think a lot of cases, if somebody has specific things set up, the, what do they call those? The, not wills, but,
living will.
Yeah, living wills, those kind of things set up. Then, like, so if somebody is in a car accident and they're in some vegetative state, and it's very clearly that they've done up paperwork to say, if I'm in this situation, pull the plug. Well, then you pull the plug.
Yeah, well, no, that's why it's important to have those things to know what you want. Same thing, if you want a DNR, do not resuscitate. It's important to have that in writing. Go ahead and figure, especially figure it out. And who do you want to be in charge of these things? Who do you want to have say? Because if you lose your mind, you can't advocate for yourself anymore. So who do you want to advocate for you? And thinking about those things, it's that's just wisdom right there, and making sure that you've got it in writing what you don't want done with you if you can't speak for yourself. So. Well, I think we pretty much covered it for today. It was a pretty light topics in the show. But thank you everyone for watching, and Chris, as always, thank you for being on. Of course, if you guys have any ideas for anything else that you'd like for us to talk about in the coming weeks, let us know. Hopefully this has been helpful for you guys, encouraging. Do all the things that YouTube likes to do, and of course, again, let us know your thoughts in the comments section here. What do you think about the abortion issue and states' involvement in it or lack thereof? Same thing with euthanasia. So just go ahead and let us know what you think about that in the comments section. We'll talk about that. Anything else you want to talk about, Chris?
Nope, that's about it for today.
All right, well, I guess we will head out. So everyone, hope you have a great rest of your week, and